Hey everyone, and welcome back to the deep dive. You guys know the drill by now. You send us the source material, and we jump in head first and really try to unearth the most interesting insights from whatever it is. And today we're diving into a future that's both intriguing and kind of unsettling, to be honest.
Yeah.
You guys sent us this animated short film called Beyond the Reset, and oh boy, let me tell you, it's a real eye opener.
Yeah, it really is. And what makes this one so interesting, I think, is that it doesn't feel like pure science fiction. It takes these very real anxieties that I think we all have today
Mm-hmm.
about, things like climate change and government control and technology, and it just like projects them into this like hyper-realistic dystopian world.
Yeah, it definitely hits close to home, right? Like the film starts with this news broadcast, and
Right.
right off the bat, we're in this world where masks are mandatory even on balconies. They're reporting 30 million new cases of this virus in a single day. Can you imagine?
It's definitely unsettling for sure. And I think what really struck me was this immediate sense of curtailed freedom. The film doesn't really dwell on it, but it's very clear that individual liberties have taken a back seat to public safety.
Yeah. And then they shift gears, and they start celebrating the success of clearing thousands of square miles of rainforest for this massive solar panel field. So it's like, are they sacrificing one environmental concern for
Yeah.
another?
It really makes you think about those potential trade-offs we might face in tackling climate change,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Like, are we willing to accept large-scale environmental changes? In the name of clean energy, what are the consequences for biodiversity, for indigenous populations? The film doesn't give us those answers, but it definitely raises those tough questions.
For sure, for sure. And it gets even more thought-provoking, I think, when they just casually mention the eradication of cows.
Just
About methane emissions.
Yeah.
So no more juicy burgers for anyone. You're stuck with this alternative protein stuff they keep talking about.
Right. And that little detail, I think, is really fascinating because it speaks to this larger point about the role of technology in this world. We see technology being used to solve problems, but also to control what people eat, how they behave. And it kind of begs the question, is this technology truly liberating, or is it just another form of control?
Yeah, and then there's the whole social credit system. They explain it like it's totally normal. Your behavior is constantly tracked, and you're either rewarded or punished accordingly. They even show people being encouraged to participate in drug trials for a score boost.
Yeah, it's that's where the film starts to get really chilling for me. It's like this system designed to incentivize conformity. You get access to better resources, maybe even move up in society if you play by their rules.
Yeah.
But what happens to those who dissent? What happens to the people who don't want to play by those rules?
No, it's like this system that preys on people's anxieties
Yeah.
and aspirations, and then you've got this universal basic income that everyone gets. But it's barely enough to cover all the fees they deduct for everything.
Yeah. It creates this illusion of financial security
Yeah.
while keeping people perpetually dependent on the system. And this brings us, I think, to like this central tension that runs throughout the entire film, the balance between individual freedom and collective good.
Yeah, and the film does such a brilliant job of subtly highlighting that tension in those early scenes. But then things get even more intense when they introduce this new virus, right?
Yes. And the way they handle this new threat really amps up those dystopian vibes. It starts small, almost like an afterthought, with just a few deaths reported in long-term care facilities.
And it sounds so eerily familiar, doesn't it? Like we've all lived through a pandemic, and I think that's what makes this part so unsettling. You can almost feel that collective anxiety rising.
Absolutely. The film really taps into our recent experiences, that sense of, wait, haven't we been here before? And then bam, nationwide lockdown. 2 weeks to flatten the curve, they say. So
Ah.
familiar.
It's like they took the playbook from our reality and just cranked it up to 11, but it goes way beyond lockdowns, doesn't it?
Well, yeah. The film quickly escalates from stay-at-home orders to forced evacuations and relocation to quarantine facilities. And the visuals in this section are really striking. Those drones scanning for non-compliant residents. The robotic voices issuing warnings.
Chilling. And it makes you realize how quickly things can shift from these seemingly benign measures to outright control. Make you wonder, at what point does protecting public health become an excuse for authoritarianism?
Yeah, and that's where the film really starts to get under your skin, I think. It forces you to confront these uncomfortable truths about the fragility of freedom and the potential for power to be misused, even in supposedly democratic societies.
It's a sobering thought, isn't it? The film really makes you question where we draw the line between safety and freedom. It really is. And it leads to this whole other layer of complexity, I think, which are the ethical implications of these solutions they're proposing. Like take the rainforest, for example. Yeah, they're replacing it with solar panels. But is that really a sustainable solution in the long run?
That's a great question. I mean, you're wiping out entire ecosystems, right?
Yeah.
Displacing indigenous communities, it feels like they're trading one problem for another.
Exactly. And it's not just the rainforest either. They've completely eliminated livestock, too. Remember that scene?
Mm-hmm.
Where they're showing off this massive factory churning out that alternative protein goop. I don't know about you, but it didn't look very appetizing.
It really didn't. And it raises all these questions about food choices, right? And the ethics of eliminating entire species from the planet. And it makes you wonder, what other compromises are they making in the name of sustainability?
And it's all tied to this social credit system, too, isn't it? It's not just about rewarding good behavior. It's about controlling every aspect of people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Think about it. Your score determines your access to housing, healthcare, even what you're allowed to eat. It creates this constant pressure to conform, to stay within the boundaries set by the system.
It's like living in a giant behavioral experiment. You know what's really disturbing to me, though? They don't even show any resistance in the film. It's like everyone has just accepted this as the new normal.
I know. That's one of the most unsettling aspects of the film for me.
Huh.
The lack of any real dissent, I think, suggests a society where critical thinking has been stifled, where people are just too afraid or too complacent to challenge the status quo.
And it makes you wonder, how did it get to this point? Was it this gradual erosion of freedoms, or did it happen overnight?
Yeah, the film doesn't explicitly answer that question, but I think it's suggesting that these dystopian scenarios, they rarely emerge out of the blue. It's usually a slow, insidious process, this series of seemingly small compromises that, over time, add up to something far more sinister.
So what's the takeaway here? Is the film just this bleak warning about the dangers of unchecked technology and government control?
I think it's more nuanced than that. It's not this simple message of technology is bad or governments are always evil. It's a much more sophisticated exploration of the complexities of power and control and the choices we make as individuals and as a society.
So it's not about pointing fingers. It's about prompting us to think critically about the systems we're creating, the technologies we're embracing, and the potential consequences of our actions.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that even well-intentioned solutions can have unintended consequences. The film is a reminder that we need to be vigilant, to question authority, and to be mindful of the trade-offs we're willing to make in the pursuit of a better future.
It's definitely a lot to unpack, and I think what makes this film so impactful is that it doesn't offer easy answers. It leaves you with a lot of questions about the kind of future we're creating.
Yeah, and I think those questions are essential. It's in grappling with these complex issues, in engaging in these difficult conversations, that we can start to envision and build a future that is both sustainable and just.
You're right. It's not about predicting the future. It's about shaping it. And it starts with awareness, with asking the tough questions, and with being willing to challenge the status quo. But I have one more question. If this future actually came to pass, if we found ourselves living in this world, what would we do? How would we navigate this reality?
Now, that's a fascinating question. And it's one that I think the filmmakers really want us to ponder, because it's not enough to just observe and analyze. We also need to imagine ourselves within these scenarios and consider how we would respond.
So if this were our reality, what role would you choose to play?
It is a good question. And, I think it's one that's really tough to answer, because on one hand, you could try to work within the system, maybe even try to subtly influence it from the inside.
Like those hackers in the movies who managed to outsmart the evil AI.
Exactly. But then on the other hand, you could choose to resist, even if it meant facing some pretty significant risks.
It's like that classic dilemma, right? Fight the system or find a way to survive within it.
Exactly. And I mean, ultimately, that choice really depends on your own values, your risk tolerance, and your assessment of the situation. There's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Yeah, it's almost like the film is challenging us to develop our own personal dystopia survival plan. What would you do? Would you be the rebel, the reformer, or the quiet conformist?
It's the thought-provoking exercise, isn't it? And it forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves, our values, and what we're willing to fight for.
Yeah, it really does. And it makes me wonder if just asking these questions, engaging in these thought experiments, might actually help us avoid these dystopian outcomes in the first place.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, maybe by confronting these potential futures, by grappling with these ethical dilemmas, we can become more aware of the choices we're making today and the path that we're collectively forging.
It's like that saying, right? The best way to predict the future is to create it.
Exactly. And I think beyond the reset is a powerful reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping the future, whether we're actively resisting dystopian trends or just making more conscious choices in our daily lives.
It's about recognizing that even small actions can have a ripple effect, that our choices matter, and that we have more agency than we often realize.
Absolutely. And that's a message worth pondering. So what are your final thoughts on Beyond the Reset? What we take away from this deep dive?
Well, I think for me, it's just this chilling reminder that the future isn't predetermined. It's like this canvas that we collectively are painting with our choices, our actions.
And our inactions.
I agree. It's a canvas that demands our attention, our critical thinking, and our unwavering commitment to building a future that aligns with our values.
Well said. And on that note of empowered action, I think we've reached the end of our deep dives into Beyond the Reset. A huge thank you to you for sending us this incredible film, and to you, the listener, for joining us on this journey. It's been a fascinating exploration, and we hope it sparked some meaningful reflections.
Yeah.
And maybe even inspired you to take action in your own life.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep